The sun burned above the royal city, turning the silver walls of the queen's arena into a mirror of heat. Crowds filled the high stone seats, their voices mixing into a roar of excitement. Today was no ordinary day. The queen herself had announced a special event. A human prisoner would fight her greatest warrior, and the fight would end in humiliation. The human, tall but wearing only simple cloth trousers, walked calmly onto the wide red sand floor. He had no armor, no shield, no real weapon, only a wooden training spear given as an insult. The alien. Guards pushed him forward, laughing under their breath. They thought this match would be over in less than a minute. From the other side, the queen's champion stepped into the arena. She was a towering alien woman, her dark armor gleaming with sharp edges, her eyes glowing like molten gold. The crowd cheered her name, stamping their feet on the stone steps. She was known for ending fights in seconds, her speed and strength unmatched, and today, she had been given a simple command from her queen: humiliate the human before killing him. The queen sat on her high throne above the arena, her silver crown catching the sunlight. Her smile was cold, filled with the pleasure of watching her enemies suffer. This was not about justice. It was about showing the galaxy that humans were weak. Her voice rang out over the arena. Begin. The warrior charged forward, her sword a blur in the air. The human did not move until the last moment. Then, with a quick step to the side, he twisted his wooden spear and caught her sword on its shaft. The clash rang like a bell. The crowd gasped. They had expected blood, not resistance. The warrior frowned and attacked again. Faster this time, the human ducked under the blade, his movements smooth and precise. It was like he had read her attack before she made it. The wooden spear struck her wrist, and for the first time in years, her sword slipped from her hand. The crowd's roar turned into stunned silence. The queen leaned forward in her seat, her smile fading. The warrior's golden eyes narrowed, and she lunged for her weapon, but the human kicked it away, his calm face never changing. He stepped back, holding the spear in a ready stance. The crowd began to murmur something was wrong. This was not the humiliation they were promised. The warrior attacked with her fists now, moving like a storm. The human met each strike. Blocking, deflecting, stepping aside, dust rose around them, their shadows twisting in the harsh sunlight. She was breathing harder now, sweat shining on her brow. The human was still calm, his breathing steady, his eyes locked on hers. Finally, with a swift spin, the human hooked the spear behind her legs and swept her to the ground. The warrior landed hard on her back, the air leaving her chest in a sharp gasp before she could rise. The tip of the wooden spear touched her throat. The arena fell silent. Every eye was on the two figures in the center of the sand. The queen gripped the armrest of her throne, her jaw tight. The human looked down at the defeated warrior. He could have finished her. Instead, he stepped back and lowered his weapon. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, he extended his hand to help her up. The warrior froze, confused by his gesture. Her pride burned. Her heart raced. Slowly, she took his hand, and he pulled her to her feet. The crowd erupted not in cheers, but in whispers. No one in the queen's arena had ever shown mercy before. The queen's plan had been simple: use her champion to humiliate the human. But now, before thousands of eyes, the opposite had happened. The human had not only survived, he had spared her champion's life, and by the ancient laws of the warrior clans, the defeated must marry the victor. The queen's humiliation had just begun. The air inside the queen's throne room was heavy, thick with the scent of incense and tension. Guards lined the walls, their armor shining under the pale light of the crystal chandeliers. The human was brought in, still wearing the same simple clothes from the arena. His wooden spear had been taken, but his calm expression had not changed. At the far end of the hall, the queen sat on her high throne. Her crown glittered, but her eyes were cold and sharp. Beside her stood the warrior, her champion now, wearing a plain cloak instead of her battle armor. Her face was hard, but there was a faint mark on her cheek where the human spear had struck. The court was silent, all eyes waiting for the queen's judgment. No one dared to speak. What had happened in the arena was unthinkable. The queen's plan had not only failed, it had turned against her. And now the ancient laws of her people stood in the way of her revenge by the code of our ancestors. The queen said slowly, her voice cold but steady, "The victor of a duel may claim the defeated as theirs." Her words echoed through the hall. The human stood still, his gaze fixed on her. "The duel between you and my champion was witnessed by the court and the people," she continued, "and by our law. She is now yours." Gasps filled the room. Some whispered in disbelief, others exchanged uneasy glances. The warrior's jaw tightened, her hands curling into fists at her sides. She stepped forward, her voice low and sharp. "I will not be owned by a human." The queen raised her hand, silencing her. "It is the law," she said. "Even you cannot defy it without breaking the honor of your clan." The warrior's teeth clenched, her pride burning. The human looked at her not with arrogance, but with the same calm he had shown in the arena. "I didn't fight you to own you," he said, his voice even. "I fought to survive." Some of the nobles scoffed at his words. To them, a human speaking with such composure was an insult. But a few in the shadows of the hall exchanged curious looks. They had seen how he fought and how he spared the champion's life. The queen leaned forward, her voice a quiet threat. "Then release her, human. Give up your claim and leave my court in peace." Her eyes glittered with malice. She wanted him gone. The human tilted his head, as if considering. Then, slowly, he shook it. "No," he said simply, "I will honor the law, even if it wasn't my choice." The queen's lips curved into something between a smile and a snarl. "So be it," she said, her voice low. "But know this: marriage to my champion will not make you safe." The guards moved forward, handing the warrior a ceremonial chain, a symbol of union in her culture. She took it with stiff fingers, her eyes never leaving the humans. In the center of the throne room, before the watching court, she placed the chain lightly around his wrist. Her touch was cold, her movements rigid. When the ritual was done, the queen announced, "By the law of the clans, you are now bound to each other." The hall filled with polite applause. But beneath it was the sound of whispered bets. How long would the humans survive? After the ceremony, the guards escorted them out. The warrior walked ahead, not speaking, her cloak swirling behind her. The human followed in silence, his mind already sensing that this marriage was a trap. In the shadowed corridors, he caught glimpses of hostile eyes watching them. Soldiers, nobles, servants, many wanted him gone. When they reached the warrior's private quarters, she turned sharply, blocking the doorway. "You may have the law on your side," she said, her voice like steel. "But do not think for a moment that I accept you." The human met her glare. Without flinching, "I don't expect you to," he replied. "But I will not treat you as a prize, and I will not be your enemy unless you make me one." Her eyes narrowed, searching his face for mockery, but found none. Without another word, she stepped inside, leaving the door open behind her. The human followed, knowing that from this moment on, the real battle had begun, not in the arena, but in the space between them. And somewhere deep in the palace, the queen was already planning her next move. The warrior's private chambers were carved from black stone, lit by the soft blue glow of crystal lamps. It was a place built for strength, not comfort. Weapons lined the walls, polished and ready for battle. The human stood just inside the doorway, taking in every detail. The warrior removed her cloak without a word. placing it on a stand before turning sharply to face him. "You may be bound to me by law," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "But that does not make you my husband in truth." Her golden eyes burned with pride. The human did not flinch. "Then let us start as allies, not enemies," he replied calmly, her lips curled in something between a sneer and a laugh. "Allies," she repeated. "You humiliated me in front of my people. Do you think I can forgive that?" The human's gaze stayed steady. "I didn't humiliate you," he said. "I defended myself. The same as you would have done." The words hung in the air for a brief second. She almost looked uncertain, but pride quickly replaced it. "Do not think you can win my respect so easily," she said, turning away. Days passed in uneasy silence. The warrior trained in the mornings, striking her practice dummies with relentless force. The human often watched from a distance, never interrupting. At night, they shared the same quarters but kept to opposite sides. The space between them was filled with unspoken words and unbroken tension. Rumors began to spread through the palace. Some claimed the warrior was secretly planning to kill her new husband in his sleep. Others whispered that she was ashamed but intrigued by him. The queen did nothing to quiet these whispers. In fact, she encouraged them. The court's eyes were always watching, waiting for the human to make a mistake. One evening, while the warrior was away in the training yard, the humans sat alone in their chambers. A faint sound reached his ears, light footsteps. Too careful to be a servant, he moved silently toward the wall. Pressing himself into the shadows, a figure slipped through the doorway. Holding a curved blade, the human acted fast, grabbing the intruder's wrist and twisting until the blade clattered to the floor. The assassin struggled, hissing in pain. "Who sent you?" the human demanded, his voice cold. The assassin only spat at his feet. Before he could press for more answers, the warrior burst into the room, sword in hand. Her eyes widened at the scene, then narrowed. She struck the assassin with the flat of her blade. Knocking them unconscious, the human watched her, wondering if she had sent the killer, but her voice was sharp with anger, not at him. "But at the situation, this is the queen's doing," she said. "She will keep testing you until you fail." The human studied her carefully. "You could have let them finish the job," he said quietly. She looked at him for a long moment before replying. "Killing you would dishonor me. I will not be seen as a coward." That night, the silence between them felt different. Not friendly, but not entirely hostile either. For the first time, the warrior spoke without anger, asking, "Why didn't you kill me in the arena?" The human considered before answering, "Because I saw no honor in it. And because I thought you were worth more than being a tool in someone else's plan." Her eyes searched his face in the dim light. There was no arrogance in his words, only truth. She said nothing more, turning away. But her expression had changed. The wall of pure hatred had cracked, even if only slightly. The next morning, they trained together for the first time. It was not gentle. Blades clashed. Feet shifted in the sand. She drove him hard, testing his skill, and though she landed more blows, he adapted quickly, forcing her to work for every strike. By the time they stopped, both were breathing heavily, sweat running down their faces. She said nothing, but there was a glint in her eyes that had not been there before. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the beginning of respect. Still, the danger around them grew with each passing day, and deep in the palace, the queen watched their slow shift from strangers to something more. Her plans for the human had not ended. They had only just begun. The palace at night was a place of whispers and hidden footsteps. Long corridors stretched under the faint light of glowing wall crystals. Servants moved quickly with their heads down, avoiding the eyes of the guards. Some doors were locked, others slightly open, hiding quiet conversations that ended the moment someone passed. The human had begun to notice things, patterns, movements, and glances that did not belong. He had lived among warriors before, and he knew the signs of a hunt. This palace was no different, only here, the prey was him. The warrior had been silent all evening, her golden eyes fixed on the floor as they sat across from each other at the low table. She picked at her food, but did not eat much. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. "The queen will not stop," she said, her voice flat. "She will send someone again." The human leaned back slightly. "I know," he replied. "What you don't know," she said, now meeting his gaze, "is that this time they will not come alone." Her tone was not a warning, it was a fact. He studied her for a moment. "You're telling me this because—" Her lips tightened. "Because I will not have my honor stained by your blood on my floor." Later that night, the sound came footsteps, soft but steady. The human was already awake, sitting in the dark. The warrior stood by the wall, a blade in each hand. They shared no words, but both knew the fight was about to begin. The door burst open, and shadows spilled inside. 4 figures moved fast, dressed in dark leather armor. Their weapons silent but deadly. The human rolled to the side as a throwing blade struck the table. The warrior lunged forward, her sword flashing in the dim light. The first attacker fell with a sharp cry, but the others pressed in. The human grabbed a fallen weapon, curved short sword unfamiliar to him. But he adapted quickly, blocking a strike and countering with a slash that drove his opponent back. The fight was fast, brutal. The attackers moved like trained killers. But so did the two who faced them. The human and the warrior fought back to back. She would strike high, he would sweep low, each move protecting the other without needing to speak. One attacker slipped past the human and went for the warrior's side. But before the blade could land, the human stepped in, taking the blow across his arm and twisting to drive his sword into the attacker's chest. Blood sprayed the wall, and the man fell. The warrior's eyes flicked to the wound on his arm. But she said nothing. Instead, she cut down the last assassin. In a clean motion, the room fell silent except for the sound of their breathing. The floor was slick with blood, the air heavy with the smell of iron. The warrior wiped her blade and looked at the bodies. "These are not palace guards," she said quietly. "No," the human replied. "These are mercenaries paid well." They dragged the bodies into the hall, leaving them for the guards to find. The warrior gave her report coldly to the captain, but her eyes kept flicking back to the human's wounded arm. When they returned to their chambers, she finally spoke. "You could have let him cut me," she said, "and saved yourself the pain." The human looked at her with the faintest smile. "And you could have let them kill me days ago," he answered, for a long moment. They just looked at each other, neither smiling. But something unspoken passed between them that night. She did not send him to sleep on the far side of the room. Instead, they sat by the low fire, saying little. The human cleaned his wound while she sharpened her blades. They were not friends, not lovers, not yet, but after tonight. They were no longer just enemies bound by law. They were something else now, to warriors standing against the same darkness. Far above, in her private chamber, the queen sat with a goblet of black wine. Her spies had already told her of the failed attack. Her lips curled in displeasure. If mercenaries could not kill him, she would need a different plan, one that would break them both. The training yard was silent, except for the sound of steel on steel. Early morning mist clung to the stone walls, curling around the practice dummies and weapon racks. The warrior moved like a storm-fast, sharp, precise, her twin blades sliced through the air in deadly arcs. She was testing herself. But more than that, she was testing him. The human faced her with a long spear this time. His arm was still wrapped in cloth from the wound he took during the mercenary attack. Yet his grip was steady, his eyes focused. They circled each other slowly, feet crunching on the sand. No words were spoken, but the tension between them burned like a hidden fire. The warrior struck first, closing the distance in a blur. Her right blade came high, the left low. The human spun the spear, blocking both. Strikes and forcing her back, she smirked a small, rare smile that carried no mockery this time. "Better," she said, before rushing him again for almost an hour. They traded blows. She was faster, but he had patience. He waited for openings, using his reach to keep her at a distance. More than once, her blade came within an inch of his face. More than once, his spear nearly knocked her off balance. Finally, she stepped back, lowering her weapons. "Not bad," she admitted. For a human, he gave a short nod. "You're faster than before." Her brow furrowed. "You notice?" "I notice everything," he replied, and for the first time, she did not take it as an insult. That afternoon, they sat together under the shade of the training yard's old ironwood tree. A servant brought them water and dried meat. For once, she didn't turn him away. Instead, she asked about his home, what it was like before the war. He spoke simply, telling her about forests that turned gold in autumn, about rivers that froze in winter and fields that bloomed in spring. Her eyes softened slightly as she listened. Her own memories were of battlefields and orders, not seasons and peace, but the quiet did not last. One of her soldiers approached, bowing quickly. "Commander," he said, "the Queen requests your presence in the Great Hall." The warrior's jaw tightened. The human rose with her, knowing the Queen never called them without a reason. In the Great Hall, the Queen was already waiting. The court was gathered, whispers curling through the air like smoke. At the far end stood a tall alien man, clad in ceremonial armor. "This," the Queen announced, "is Commander Raz." Her tone was rich with meaning. "He is here to challenge the human to a trial of strength." The warrior's eyes narrowed. Raz was not just a commander. He was a killer. The human glanced at her, reading the warning in her gaze. The Queen smiled. "If the human loses, the marriage bond will be broken, and my champion will be free." Gasps rippled through the hall. It was a trap, a test, and a public spectacle all at once. The trial was set for the next morning. Back in their chambers, the warrior faced him. "You can walk away from this," she said, her voice low. "I can tell them you refuse." The human shook his head. "And let the Queen think she can control me." "No," her eyes burned, but not with anger. "You don't have to win for me," she said. "I'm not doing it for you." He replied, "I'm doing it because I choose to." That night, she sharpened his borrowed spear herself. She didn't say it, but her actions spoke louder than any words when the morning came. They entered the arena together. The crowd's roar shook the air. Raz stood waiting, a massive war axe in his hands. The fight began like thunder. The human dodged the first crushing blow, sand flying beneath his feet. The warrior stood at the edge of the arena, her hands clenched tight. Every strike, every dodge, every counter, they were all a reminder that their fates were now tied. And as the human began to turn the tide, forcing Raz back step by step, a strange truth settled in her heart. She didn't just respect him now. She wanted him to win. The roar of the crowd still echoed in the human's ears as he stood in the center of the arena. Commander Raz lay on the sand, his war axe out of reach, his chest rising and falling in heavy breaths. The fight was over. The human had won. The Queen's trap had failed again. From her throne above, the Queen's smile did not falter, but her eyes told a different story. Cold, sharp, and calculating, she rose slowly, her jeweled robes flowing like water as she addressed the crowd. "Twice now," she said, her voice carrying over the silence. "The human has stood against our greatest warriors and lived." The court applauded politely, though many looked uneasy. The warrior stood near the arena's edge, her gaze locked on him for the first time in public. There was no disdain in her eyes, only concern. The human noticed, but he did not show it. Later, in the dim halls of the palace, the queen summoned her most trusted advisor. "We will not test him with blades again," she said, her voice low. "Steel only feeds his legend." The advisor bowed. "Then what will you do, my queen?" Her lips curved in a slow smile. "I will turn her against him the next day." A formal announcement spread through the palace. There would be a grand tournament in 3 days, an event where all champions, even the queen's own, would fight for honor. The warrior was ordered to compete. The human was told he too would fight, but his match would be against her. When the warrior heard, her blood ran cold. She went to the queen at once, bowing stiffly. "This is not our way," she said. "Husband and wife do not meet in the arena unless one must be removed." The queen finished for her, her smile thin. "It is a test of loyalty and skill." The warrior clenched her fists. She could not refuse without dishonoring her clan, and if she held back in the fight, she risked punishment worse than death. The queen saw the conflict in her eyes and leaned closer. "Fight him, as you would any other enemy, and if you win, you will be free." That night, the warrior returned to her chambers in silence. The human was there, seated by the fire, repairing the strap on his spear. "They want us to fight," she said. At last, her voice flat. He didn't look up. "I know." Her eyes narrowed. "And you're not angry?" "I'm not surprised," he replied. "This was always coming." For a long moment, they said nothing. The firelight flickered between them. Finally, she stepped closer, her voice low. "If I go all out, I could kill you." He met her gaze. "Without flinching, and if I go all out, I could kill you." A faint, humorless smile touched her lips. "I don't want this," she admitted, the words tasting strange on her tongue. "Neither do I," he said, "but we can make it look real." Without losing ourselves, she studied him carefully, wondering if he truly believed they could fool the queen. The day of the tournament came quickly. The arena was filled beyond capacity. The sound of the crowd like a storm. The queen sat on her high throne, her smile bright, her trap perfectly set. The warrior and the human stood across from each other, weapons in hand. The announcer's voice rang out, "Fight." They clashed hard, blades meeting with sparks, to the crowd. It looked like a true battle, every strike fierce, every dodge sharp, but underneath, their movements carried a rhythm, a silent code between them. She would strike high, so he could block dramatically. He would counter low to make her stumble in a convincing show. Yet the queen's eyes were sharp. She leaned forward, sensing something on the stands. Her advisor whispered, "They are holding back." The queen's smile tightened. Then, with a flick of her fingers, she gave an unspoken order to the guards as the match neared its end. Armed soldiers suddenly stormed the arena. The crowd gasped, unsure if this was part of the show. The warrior and the human turned back to back in that instant. They knew the queen had never planned for either of them to leave this fight alive. The queen's soldiers poured into the arena like a flood of steel. Their armor clattered, their boots pounded against the red sand. The crowd's cheers turned to shocked murmurs. Some stood to see better, others shrank back, sensing blood would spill soon. The human tightened his grip on the spear. Beside him, the warrior drew both blades in one fluid motion. They didn't need words, their eyes met for a second. And that was enough. Back to back, they faced the incoming wave. The first soldier swung high. Aiming for the human's head, he ducked under and drove the spear into the man's chest. Twisting hard before pulling free, the warrior's blades cut down to more before they could surround her. Dust rose around them, the air thick with the metallic scent of blood. The queen leaned forward on her throne, her smile gone. She had expected fear, retreat, or surrender. Instead, the pair fought like one creature with 2 hearts and 4 hands. Every move they made covered the other. Every strike was timed as if they had trained together for years. The crowd began to cheer not for the soldiers, but for them. The sound grew louder, shaking the walls of the arena. Even those who had doubted the human now roared his name. The queen's hands tightened on the armrests of her throne. A soldier slipped past the warrior's guard, his blade cutting deep into her side. She staggered but stayed upright. Gritting her teeth against the pain, the human moved instantly, shoving her back and taking the next blow himself, his shoulder burning where steel bit into it. They fought on, wounded but relentless. Finally, the last soldier fell, collapsing in the sand with a dull thud. The arena was silent for a heartbeat, then erupted in deafening cheers. The people had seen enough. This was no mere fight. It was survival against betrayal. And in the eyes of the crowd, they had won. The queen rose, her face like carved stone. "This farce ends now," she declared, her voice cold, but the voices from the stands drowned her out. "Let them go." Someone shouted, "Honor them," cried another. The chant spread until it was a roar. The warrior turned slowly to face her queen. Blood streaked her side, her armor dented, but her back was straight. "You sought to break me," she called, out her voice carrying over the noise, "but all you've done is bind me to him by honor, not law." She gestured toward the human. "He stood with me when your soldiers turned their blades on us. I will stand with him until my last breath." The crowd roared even louder. The queen's face darkened. She could not order their deaths now, with the entire arena watching. Not without risking open rebellion. With a sharp wave of her hand, she turned away. "Let them leave," she said, her voice cold. It was not mercy, was defeat hidden behind royal command. Escorted out of the arena, the human and the warrior walked side by side. Once outside the gates, the city's people pressed around them, offering food, cloth, even weapons. They had become more than fighters. They were symbols. Symbols of defiance, of unity between two worlds that had been enemies for centuries. They left the city together that night, traveling under the cover of darkness. Beyond the walls, the open plains stretched wide beneath a sky full of stars. The warrior walked with a slight limp, her hand occasionally brushing her side where the wound still throbbed. The human glanced at her. "You need rest," he said. She shook her head. "Not yet. Not until we are far from her reach." Hours later, they made camp near a riverbank. The fire crackled between them. For the first time since they had met, there was no wall of pride, anger, or mistrust between them. "You were never my enemy," she said quietly, staring into the flames. "And you were never my prisoner," he replied. Silence settled, but it was a peaceful one. They both knew this was not the end. One day, they would return. The queen's humiliation was complete for now, but her shadow still stretched across the land. When that day came, they would stand together again, not as enemies forced into marriage, but as warriors who had chosen each other. From shame to glory, their story had only just begun.